Hello, my name is Michael Whalen, and I am here with five of my colleagues, and we are here to talk about Spencer Brewer's new record, Behind the Veil. And it- while I could probably introduce everybody badly or forget something really, really important, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves, humble brags accepted at this point, which I think would be great. And just give a little context, probably best to keep things sort of specifically to the kind of work you did with Spencer, and then we'll get going. So, Cookie, why don't you go first?
Should I say well, I'll just do this. My name is Cookie Marenko, and I think I've known Spencer for 3 decades. Yep. And I was so happy when he gave me the call to mix a record, happy to know he was still doing music, and just excited to work with him. And he's come down to my studio, OTR, which is now in its 40th year of existence. And also went up to his place several times. And here's a little unknown trivia. I think you were the last place I actually wore 4-inch heels to go in and mix a record. Up at your place. I came in
way out in the country where I live in heels.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It was just kind of my thing at the time, but those are long gone. It's been Uggs for the last 10 years.
Okay.
That's nice. And Cookie is also the high priestess of high resolution audio as well. She is. She's really great at that. Bobby.
Yes, I'm Bobby Cochran, and I was the engineer for this record. I worked for Spencer in his studio for a really long time. I can't remember exactly how long. It was 10 years or ish.
10 or 12 years.
I worked at the studio and did a bunch of work for him there, and spent a bunch of years as an engineer. And in the last 10 or so years, I've phased out of recording and have been in the photography and videography world, and so that's kind of where I am now. I engineered Spencer's last record that we made at his house, and this record, it was kind of, I was just telling somebody this story yesterday. Spencer had called me a couple of years ago saying he wanted to make a new record and wanted to do it at his place, and we kind of were talking about how we were going to do it. And I came out to his place to talk about it on the day that everything started shutting down for COVID. And I was living full time in my van, traveling around a bunch at the time. And Spencer was like, well, why don't you can just stay here until, this is over. And I ended up staying there for a year. And so we spent a lot of time together and worked on the record kind of intermittently throughout that year. And it was a very sweet and relaxed sort of process. And it was really nice to kind of dip back into recording again after having not done it for many years. So, yeah.
Wow. Over. Cool. Awesome. Jeremy.
My name's Jeremy Cohen, and this probably starts with being a violinist and composer and arranger. And I've known Spencer longer than Spencer's known me, because I remember when I was in college at Sonoma State in the late 70s, I was working with musicians who were working with Spencer, with, Doug Harmon and other musicians. So your name was always very present to me with one degree of separation. And I think that's the whole deal, is that until we started working together, and Spencer, you can tell me when that was, but it wasn't until after the into the 2000s where we actually started collaborating.
Yeah.
I had known of you already for nearly 25 years or 30 years, and was familiar with some of your music. And Spencer came to me on previous projects wanting to incorporate strings and have a violin player on some of his stuff. And I think we just immediately hit it off. His music speaks to me, even when he plays on solo piano music, it has an orchestrated feel to it. He thinks in a very broad and orchestrated way, even with his composition. So it was a natural for me to, love the guy, love his music, like what's not to get involved. And it's really blossomed into a long-term friendship, collaboration. And also, I have to say that it was Spencer that brought me ultimately to Cookie, who I had also known of for so many years. Her reputation, for the incredible music she's recorded. She's, people reserve a space in your head as sort of legendary, and Cookie's one of those people. And so Spencer really opened that door, and a friendship has developed between Cookie and myself and Quartet San Francisco, my group. The mild bragging rights part of the show is, multi-Grammy nominated string quartet in a field. They used to call it Grammys crossover. So, and so we're crossover artists. And I think without too much explanation, so is Spencer, so is Cookie. People who embrace multiple genres and love playing good music. And I'm here. When Spencer calls, when Cookie calls, the answer is yes. So it's been a very happy collaboration.
So
Very
we have Jeremy on video saying that, so we could at any point, we could play back Jeremy just in case he has like a moment. And there you go. Nancy, dear Nancy, please.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rumble, and Spencer and I met, I think it was in 1984. And I was on the road and I did a house concert outside of the Bay Area, and Spencer came to that show and we met.
You were with Paul Winter.
No, I was with Jim Scott. It was a house concert. Yeah, it was just Jim and I.
Right.
And and I had recently transplanted from the East Coast out to the Pacific Northwest, and Spencer knew a guitarist up there, Eric Tingstad, and he and Eric were talking, and long story short, Eric and I've had a recording career of like 30 or 40 years, and Spencer and Eric and I did a release kind of together. I was kind of the glue between the two. Eric and I had done part of a release, and then Spencer had invited me to play on some of his tracks for Emerald, which was a long time ago on Narada when we were on that label. And that's really where I got to know Spencer better, by doing recording. And he would come up to the Seattle area, and we would work on our parts, and it just had a great time. And then, of course, coincidentally found out that we were both from Texas, and then even more so from San Antonio, that we had all this kind of deep roots. And I have to laugh when I'm thinking about Spencer and Boogie Woogie. When I hear influences in his music, I can definitely hear Texas. I hear Hispanic influences. I hear country influences. I hear down home influences. It's danceable music. So much of the time, for me anyway, I can dance to it. And I love in Spencer's music that the fact that he'll be kind of going along in this world, and he will harmonically put this unique twist suddenly that will shift your whole reality of the piece. And it's so beautiful, the magic that you can put into your pieces with those beautiful melodies, and then all of a sudden these really beautiful shifts in the harmony. So I just thank you. And so it was just a thrill when you emailed me a few months ago and asked me if I could play one of the tracks. And I have a little home studio, so I said, yeah, this would be great. So we had a fun time working on the track together and tweaking it and making it just like we wanted it to sound, and especially how you wanted it to sound, most importantly. And now to hear this release is just beautiful. I'm so happy for you. And the diversity of it is just spectacular. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for doing this.
Man, these introductions are so good. It's like, the video's over. So, hey, guys, thanks so much. We're out. Thanks so much. We're going to cut this off right here. So, Nancy, I didn't know you were from Texas. Like, holy bananas. Like, there's a headline right out of the gate. I had no idea. So, that's
I've seen. I used to compare Bubba stories out of Texas.
Public stories. Yeah, well, there you go.
But you're on the news yourself too.
The quickie version is I am also a recording artist and TV composer, and I've won a couple of Emmys, and I've done some stuff. But in the context of Spencer's album, I've been working with him on the marketing and working with him on getting the word out and getting his audience sort of going after a long period of him not releasing music. And so on the one hand, it's great that he, is, back and the music is gorgeous and the album is beautiful. It's very interesting to have like a audience from the 90s that remembers him as like the Narada guy, and a brand new audience who like getting used to him or getting introduced to him for the first time. So it has been a incredible project because Spencer has been so willing to jump into stuff. If you've seen the 2 videos that he's done, I'm so proud of him. They're so cool. And he's done such a great job in, like making it happen. And he's really like, not only has he gone and done the music, but he's like, produced his ass off. And that's been really, really, really great. So, but I remember the first time I ever heard Spencer's music was when I went to Narada. I went to Milwaukee. It was Michael Sullivan's office. And he had a whole stack of Spencer CDs at some place in this totally disheveled room. And I was like, who's that? Oh, he's great. You'd love him. He writes this beautiful stuff and whatever. And I love Michael Sullivan so much. He's one of my all-time favorite people. And I remember going off into a corner with a pair of headphones and hearing Spencer being like, oh my God, like just this guy can play, like holy bananas. And so I've been sort of a secret fan of Spencer's for a long time. And Nancy's absolutely right. Like he just has these turns of phrases and all of a sudden it's just like, wow, like I never would have anticipated that. And just emotionally, just where he goes. Anyway, but I've actually only known Spencer for a year, less or less, and so it's been wonderful to make a new friend and to work with him so closely on this beautiful project, but also to come from my background, from having run a record company and with all the stuff that I've done and my experience, whatever, to bring it and to sort of bestow it upon him and saying, okay, like now we've created the framework for something that's going to take you to the next record and the next record and the next 5 and 10 years of your career. So off we go. But the first question is actually for Spencer yourself. So it's been a minute since you put out any new music. And so the question that I have is, why this music and why now?
This music is I haven't done one in 14 years, and over that period of time, I had to resurrect my life after the collapse of 2009 and the music industry completely flipping on its head. And so during that time, I wasn't writing a song a week. I was like 1 or 2 or 3 a year. So over a long period of time, they started collecting up. And then when COVID hit, a little bit before COVID, all of a sudden I realized I had a couple of records sitting here and I didn't have any plans to do anything with them. I just thought, well, it'd be kind of fun just to get them down. That's when I called Bobby, and he'd not been keeping up throughout the years because we're good friends. We live up here together, and it all just worked out. Let's just very slowly, very calmly record these things as they're ready to be recorded. And so there was no push, there was no deadline, there was no budget, there was nothing to meet other than just the relaxation of let's put up the really nice old Neumann mics and record it. And so that's how it happened. Then eventually I realized, wow, I'd really like this particular song to have Jeremy and his string quartet on it. That'd be so wonderful. And this album really, Michael, was more of, I wanted the compositions to stand out on their own instead of all the arrangements and all the orchestration around them like they had been for the previous so many records. Because so many times in the previous records, not putting anything down, is that the arrangements or the key players, the key soloists were featured, and rightfully so. And that was the time it was going on. So I wanted the compositions to stand on their own here instead of, as I said, all the people around it building it to this next thing. Cinematic was about the big build, full symphonies, and just, It took us 12 years to record that record because there was so much on it. Whereas on this one, I wanted the essence. And when the essence came in, 3 or 4 songs showed up from the old catalog in the 80s that I wanted to bring into the fold of all these new pieces, which fit together because the compositions themselves really lent itself to what I was doing on now. And this particular album is really me going inside deep, looking at the stuff quietly instead of, oh, it's got to get on the radio. Oh, it's got to get me a tour. Oh, it's got to do this or that. I didn't want any of that noise. No noise. So this was basically going inward around this particular record. And that's why it's behind the veil, what's going on behind all the other noise.
I don't know, the big explanation finally. All right, well, guys, it only took 6 months for me to get that. So thank you. All right, so we're good. So thanks for that. So Jeremy, you know, we could talk about Parasols, the arrangement, but it's so exquisitely beautiful. Like what you brought to it. Because in a way, it's almost like, because, you know, Nancy and I have been talking about the Spencer harmonic thing, and you're bringing a different harmonic sensibility to Spencer's, but the way they marry, where they meet each other is, it's perfect. I mean, like, I love what you did. Talk to me about, what was your approach to arranging this music and sort of arranging in general, please.
I think the clearest answer I could give to that is that the music, you know, as previously discussed, the music has a very visceral feeling, and music for me is actually pretty physical. And when I heard the tune without anything raw, just with the piano track, and Spencer wanted me to put something on it, I immediately try to register what the feeling is that music ignites in me, or, you know, gets, and it had a cabaret feel to it in a way. I spent a little bit of, not enough, but a little bit of time in Paris and cafes under parasols, and you know, I feel like what music is appropriate in that space, you know, and it's cabaret style European, a combination of sort of very emotional, European influenced, and, you know, having a classical background added, combined with being an improviser, sort of allowed me to sort of create a feel for me that felt like playing in a Paris cafe.
Yeah.
Because the music just unrolled, you know, with that visceral sense already in Spencer's arrangement. But I just wanted, you know, I kind of want to bring up a funny thing. Is like, I write too much, and then I start working with Spencer, and he says, nope, not there, that, too much, cloudier, you know, clear this up. So basically I sort of dump too much information into it, and we basically call it, you know, take out notes, thin it out, make it more elegant. And that's really the collaborative process, you know, that takes place. And, you know, generally could be said for my writing is that it starts with too much, and it generally gets refined. But Spencer had, you know, this guy has opinions, and he's not afraid to share them. I see that.
Wait. Spencer has opinions? No. No. He's like, well,
Busted.
if you just get over like stop thinking stuff personally, you know, and get to the bare bones of what's working, what's not working, and it's not personal, then we end up with, you know, arriving at a place where it's working for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has that resonant, the string stuff resonates well with the piano stuff, and it stays intimate in a certain way, even though I'm, you know, creating underlying grandiosity to the tune as it develops. I mean, maybe that's not the right term, but it gets emotionally larger by virtue of the richness of the ensemble increasing towards the end of the piece and stuff like that. But Spencer's totally in touch with that as we develop. There's really a wonderful back and forth collaborative.
Yeah, Jeremy's a really wonderful person to work with collaboratively. As he just said, I just want to mirror this because you're so facile, you're so quick, and you have such fantastic ideas. The execution, that's a given. I mean, you're just such a great player. But as an arranger, you have you especially in the second A, what you threw in there on that lead line coming behind it was so perfect for that primo.
So beautiful.
It's just you nailed that thing. The first time I heard it, that's staying in. That's there. Good job.
You know, the first time I heard it, I was just like, "Are you freaking kidding me?"
Right.
I'm from New York. I want to do the full fat version of that. But but God, that was so good.
So the trick is how to be in there and be present without taking away. I think I just want to say that in thinking about it, also my influence in tango, where there's a second voice.
Right.
You have your melodic line. Spencer's lines is outstanding, and I can't add anything to that, but I can answer it in the second position so that it exists to be supportive of the main voice. It's reality. So that was fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Really, wow, wonderful. So Bobby, I've heard one or two piano records in my life. Couple. I have to say, no hyperbole, that the piano sound on this record is one of my favorite of all time. And I have worked with great people, Tom Eaton and a bunch of people and great people and, whatever. And what's your approach with getting a piano sound? I know Spencer's kind of a lunatic because he's a piano guy, literally, piano technician. So between him as a player, him as a technician, you as an engineer, you guys in that crazy space, you throw a couple of Neumanns in there and then you go to tape. That doesn't make sense. Like, to me, like what's your approach for getting that sound?
Well, I wish that I had a really deep answer to that question, but the honest truth of it is that we spent so much time in that studio recording that piano over the course of my being there for 10 plus years or whatever it was. And that's Spencer's piano. Like, he knows that instrument better than any other instrument probably. And like, it really was like, we kind of know where to point the mics and we kind of know where to put the piano in the room for him to be comfortable. And we could put the mics kind of wherever, as long as like he was comfortable where he was playing. And I think we might have spent maybe like 15 minutes or so moving mics around slightly and just like kind of trying to see like what is the perfect spot. And those mics are wonderful. And like, it really was that simple. And so, we recorded in a bunch of short sessions over the course of a year or whatever. And, we just put a piece of tape on the floor and said, yep, that's where the mics go. Or I take a picture and see like, okay, we can like get it generally in the right spot. And we did a little slight bit of movement in particular tunes, I think, just to maybe get more space or get more accuracy. But it was very simple.
We've done over 250 records in this studio, and I'd have to say at least 80 or 90 of them were piano centric or pianos focused. And the hardest person we ever did in here, just because his ears were so fantastic, was Kostya. And good Lord. But Spencer, this one note, we need to work on this one note. And we would be on that one note for hours. Over the years, we finally found what's the sweet spot, and it's a Yamaha C7, and the room was built around this piano.
Yeah.
And as Bobby said, and I've worked on so many of them, it's just there's a placement that we know this is a sweet spot, and it's just moving around within that itself. And we were very lucky that Neil Harris, great engineer, fantastic gear. Neil has a ginormous collection of Neumanns. When I had the studio, we had a pretty big collection of them. But I ended up borrowing 2 or 3 different pairs and finding one just was the right one. And actually, I loved it so much I bought them from him so I could keep it. 1960s, I think they're 582s.
Well, I mean, but you've tweaked that Yamaha so many times that it's barely a Yamaha at this point. It's like, it's, some hybrid of something and something else. And, so
I remember there was a time we were doing Stuart Copeland's first video with, who's the guy that did all the Godfathers, the director?
Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, Coppola, and I was doing it with Copeland and Trace Burgos and San Rafael, and basically Stewart wanted to do all these wild things with this piano, and it was a 9-foot Baldwin, and I actually slept in the control room for 3 or 4 days while he said, "Okay, right now I want the hammers to be heavier, because I'm going to do this weirdness to it." We put foil. Anyway, it's like, what does somebody want it to sound like? The goal is to try to get to that place, no matter what that means.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Prepared piano. I remember those days. Wow. Okay. Wait, I think I have samples with that. Okay. Go. There you go. So, Nancy, we've been talking about working with Spencer and like what that process is. Like, give us a little bit more of an insight. Like, did you have a part? Did you write something? Like, how did your contribution to the album come about?
Well, after Spencer emailed me and he sent me the track and he said, "Do you hear anything on this? And if you do, just sketch something out and send it back," because that's kind of the beauty of a home studio now. You can go in when you feel like it, try some stuff out, upload it, send it off, and kind of go back and forth about what you think. So I think there were first a couple of things, and not unlike Jeremy, what you were saying, Spencer might say, "Nah, that's too much, and I don't want it there." And it's often interesting, and I've noticed this over my career working with pianists in particular, when they come to you and they have pretty much got their track down, they're always playing the melody. So they don't leave space out for normally what an oboist might come in to do is to play the melody without playing it in unison, which is fine. It's just, what it is. But if that's what's there, then your goal is to create something around it that's going to be of interest. But the other component also, Jeremy, you mentioned this too, as did you, Spencer, is that this particular release, you really wanted to focus on the piano and the compositions. So it's learning how to kind of sit in the bed and at the same time, and I have to again thank you, Spencer, because the artists who have taken that risk to bring an instrument like I play, like an oboe and an English horn, and it was basically just piano, English horn, oboe, and sometime I think in a couple of the sections I might have even doubled the oboe. So maybe there were 2 oboes and an English horn. I mean, that's a weird combo platter. You don't so it's fun to work, that's the quirkiness of Spencer too, is that he's not afraid to jump out and try some more unusual sounds in a sweet piece like the one that this particular track is. And then we tweaked it and we'd send it back and forth. You go, "No, just like you were saying, Jeremy, I want more of this here, or I want less of this here." And so over a period of time, we got down to the place where we liked what was there. And then I think even when you went probably into mixing it, you even tweak some more things there. So it's, it's how it is. And when you do session work, you'll bring something to the party and then it transforms by the artist whose project it is. So.
Yeah, one of the things that one of the things that I think you and Jeremy both did a beautiful job with is keeping your individual voice, your personality musically, while supporting Spencer. That's incredibly hard to do. There's because people can blow all over something and do whatever and whatever, but the idea that you can sort of sit in behind something sounding like you and not taking away from what's happening on the piano and lifting the entire thing up, that's next level. And Nancy, you have such a beautiful sound. Like you have like the timbre is so beautiful, and it has like such a nice feel to it. But you and Jeremy, it's it's being an arranger, yes, it's being a master musician, but it's the combination of the two, being able to execute the idea at that level. Really, really, really beautiful job.
It's
also where Cookie comes in.
When we first started working together, it was on my second album, Shadow Dancer, before you and Eric had met. And what happened was Eric and I was working on it, and you and Eric were doing something, then you and I were doing Shadow Dancer. And that's when the whole thing, Eric Linder put it together. And back then, I was trying to leave space for all these lead instruments. Let me back them up. Let me get in the background, because you guys had such beautiful tones and beautiful lead lines. And my fault, definitely a good point of Michael's making, is that on this particular record, I just played the song as I composed it. And I did not leave space for soloists.
Damn you. Come on.
And because of that, these poor people have to work around my already, thick lead line inside of this thing. So it was a little more trickier than normal, because I usually do leave gaps for the lead lines themselves, but that wasn't the purpose of this. So they did a yeoman's job, both of them.
Jeremy, I just want to make sure you didn't get stepped on. What were you going to say?
Well, I just wanted to add that while balance is everything in a string quartet, the fact that we're recording all of this into microphones and then this arrives in Cookie's lap, to actually balance it for a recording, that's going to go out to the world and represent the tune is a whole other process that, because it sounds so beautiful, and we've recorded elements of it in separate places, it goes to the next instrument for balance, which is entirely critical to the emotional.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something I'm glad you let in with that. I got to the point I was working with another engineer on the mixes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it wasn't anything on him. He's fantastic. He just wasn't working. And that's why it took me 9 months to where finally I realized I don't have the ears anymore. My ears I've got very loud tinnitus, and I can't hear what I used to when I used to produce all these records. And there was somebody's ears that I fully trusted. And I called Cookie and I said, I love what you do. There's nothing I've ever heard you've done that I didn't like. You have ears of gold, and I'm literally going to hand you this, and I need you to tell me, does it sound good? Because I can't hear it anymore. And so we went back and forth, and she would have the lead lines up or this, that, and the other thing. And she has these what are those speakers in that upstairs? What are those things?
Oh, the upstairs room, those are the Sony ATR ones, I think.
Those are God's mother's speakers sitting on in this room. So I just sit in this couch, wait for her to come up, and we'd listen on these just incredible speakers. And I'd look at her and goes, does that sound good? Because I 100%, just like Jeremy said, as much as Nancy played here, Jeremy played there, her instrument is what this thing sounds like.
Wow. Cookie, you have this huge cloud of love coming at you. I'm not even sure how to ask you a question now, because it's like, wow, everyone just loves Cookie. I'm trying to think of a single thing that I've ever heard that Cookie has worked on that I haven't gone, wow, that sounds great.
That sounds fantastic. And she's also well known for the piano sound she gets on that Steinway that she's adored for decades.
So Cookie, my question is more of a Spencer question, because he outed himself about his hearing thing, which I appreciated, and so the record sounds beautiful. It has a very, very sort of like natural, organic, acoustic thing to it, and like Jeremy said, like the balance, really beautiful. What was working with Spencer like, where you're talking about not dealing in inches, you're dealing in like little tiny millimeters of stuff in terms of, cutting this, fortune cookie up and making this into into an album. So like, what was that process like? Where yes, he trusted you. Yes, you've been friends for decades. Yes, you have a reputation. Yes, you have a beautiful studio. Yes, those Sony speakers are beautiful. They're great. Blah 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 blah. blah. But they're still how do the two of you get together and say, you know what, soup's done now? Because you could stir that soup for a long time in that conversation. How's that go?
Well, those Sony speakers are actually a secret weapon.
Okay.
And I love working with Spencer. And actually, for somebody who says he can't hear, has really great hearing. So I'm fortunate that we have a lot of the same goals in mind. And a lot of times, let me describe that in my own studio here, that where you see here, there's not. Show you. Those are not the Sony speakers, but I have a number of speakers that I rely on here, and then I send Spencer upstairs to relax. And one of the key factors for me is making sure you don't overwork any artist's listening ability. And so if they're in the control room with you, it's almost hopeless because their ears are going to get tired. I mean, those of us in the studio all day long, we realize this, and Spencer probably knows it himself, Bob, everybody on this panel. So when I thought I got everything into shape, then I would send Spencer upstairs to listen, and he would make some notes, and we'd make some adjustments. And the other secret weapon that Spencer, I don't know if I use this one on you too much, but if I didn't quite agree with where somebody was going, I would do everything in my power to get a mix close, because I know ultimately the artist is going to take it home and listen, and they're not used to listening to any of my 6 different sets of speakers. The true test is once they take it home. So what I would do is, if I thought we might have been a little off base on something, I might say something like, that's great, I think we got it. Can I just do one more mix?
Right.
And then I'll do one mix for me that I know, okay, I know this one's going to work for me. And then a lot of times that ends up being it. And it's only because I know how ears can get tired. But I wanted to comment on Nancy and Jeremy, because they did a fantastic job and understood exactly what the point of this music was in their arrangements. And for one, having been an oboist myself at one time and a pianist, for me, working with acoustic instruments is a joy. I mean, the real quality, get away from the synthesizer. There were some synths appropriately played, but working with the real instrument, there's just nothing like it. And the other thing I want to mention that they haven't said yet was their ability to mimic the dynamics that Spencer had already played. That is so crucial to making a great mix.
Yeah.
And Spencer's album, when it came, could have been a solo piano record as far as I was concerned. Did play everything. He couldn't release an album of solo piano with just the piano. But their additions were supportive, more of an arrangement. I didn't feel the necessity for any of their instrumentation or orchestration to take over what Spencer had already done. They really just enabled it to increase dynamically. And their dynamics and their sense of dynamics and ability to play the dynamics that Spencer already established was crucial in getting a great mix. And especially difficult with a string quartet.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the hardest things I had on this album was I'm hearing other parts. I'm hearing full sections. I mean, there's one song of this thing that I've already scored. It's got 8 instruments. And it was just, I wanted more, and I could hear more, and I know it would be a better song to have it there, but I had to keep with the integrity of the compositional. I mean, that was where it was coming from. And so for Cookie to lay out, both Jeremy and Nancy did what they did elegantly. I mean, it's really true. And that's why, it's nothing on me. It's more them. They're the skilled artist at this. They're amazing what they do.
Well, I mean, you actually just pointed to something that I wanted to point out, which is, yeah, you could have scored it for more instruments, but there's an integrity here. You have a focus and a discipline, which is one of the things that I have always been just I just admired through this entire process with you, just how focused and disciplined that you've been through this process. Yeah, and you can hear it in the tracks, you can hear it in how it's done, you can certainly hear it in the mixes and the recording, and just really, really, really great work. For people who might be watching this, who may be creative people who are like, no, we just throw another part on there, we just do another thing in here. What's for you? What's the real benefit of coming from focus and having it not be something that's taking away from something, but something that's really adding to something?
I feel on this, I feel, we all our compositions are our children. They're our babies. It's just what we do. Whether you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a musician, whatever it is, a director, doesn't matter. And I want to, my initial feeling is to dress up the child. I got a beautiful baby. Now let's put some great clothes on this baby. And look at that haircut. And what wonderful shoes. That's what I've done on 95% of all my other recordings. On this particular one specifically, and I don't want to beat this up, is that the initial composition is where, if I was going to listen quietly, there's where the real magic is. And maybe the oboe, or maybe the classical guitar, or Paul McCandless's saxes, that I've used on so many records, is going to just take this thing off in the stratosphere, which it did so many times. And yet, if I'm going to pull back and look what's behind the veil, it's just the essence of the composition.
Yeah.
So it was, I'm not going to beat this up, but it's just true. It was very difficult to keep it to the few tracks that have instruments on it now, because as Bobby will attest, hearing us doing so many albums here, I'm just filled with all these ideas of what really that song could do.
Yeah.
So it was a constant battle of not doing it.
Yeah. So as sort of a final question, and something
to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jeremy, you have something to say?
Yeah, I'm listening to you speak, and I'm reflecting personally on art versus commerce. And Spencer has now, in a way, arrived at a place where he has the luxury of focusing on the art and not necessarily making commerce the driving, motivator. That the creation of art and beauty is the point, and honest to goodness, I spend a lot of time focusing on that. Stay with the creation of art, because art and commerce, I don't think we're ever meant to exist in the same, in the same realm. They're not, they don't really relate to each other except for the society that we live in. So I won't go too deep. I'm not going to beat that one up.
No.
But to stay with the nugget, of the creation of beauty and what something feels like is, I think, what's really the essence, here is, and it's a great luxury.
It is, but I agree with you that I think creating art in the absolute, protected by the demands of commerce, I think is how art is ultimately made. I mean, you've got to live, but can you do it in such a way where you can still live and still create the art all at the same time? But just as a final question for Spencer and the whole group, you guys can all jump in on this, which is about the future. The album has come out, this beautiful acoustic record done by master musicians, master engineers. And what do you guys see as the future of records? Is this the last album? Are we here in 2023? Are we looking at, you know, the last album, the last thing. I'm doing all this research right now on artificial intelligence. I'm writing this probably 5 to 7,000 word blog on the future of artificial intelligence, and I'm reading all of this stuff and how far back it goes, how far it goes back, like all the way back to the 50s, and so, and how that's affecting and how it will be affecting us, like right now. It's actually affecting us right this second, as Spotify and Apple Music are putting tracks up there made by robots, and there you go. But what do you guys think the future of the record business is? Like, what do you guys like now that, you know, we have this beautiful, perfect pearl of an album out there? Is this a white elephant? Is this like the last of the buffalo? Is there hope on like that there's going to be more of this done, created, the art created in an absolute environment, or not? Jeremy, go for it.
Jeremy, you've got an extraordinary project going on right now. I mean,
Yes,
it's over the top what you're trying to accomplish with this.
It's so good. It's
You are not in the cutting edge, but as Skywalker says, you are on the bleeding cutting edge of what this thing would not do with what you're trying to do right now.
I heard some of the tracks, and without getting anything, they're amazing.
Yeah, incredible. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm closing on a production soon on an album for Quartet San Francisco with combined with 18-piece big band, Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Band. And now we'll have Take Six, the vocal group, on 2 tracks on the album. And it's you know, it's a Spencer, it's like the nugget is the string quartet, and then
Right.
everything, you know, it sort of grew out of that. And it's, you know, it's going to be going on a year and a half of production on all of that. But that project is coming soon, and it's based on the music of Raymond Scott. But in listening to your comments, I would look to Cookie, who has an eye about the industry and where it's going and where, you know, moving forward. I would defer to Cookie for where maybe, you know, some wisdom on where she sees the future of this music that we produce and end up printing on a postcard, frozen in one position.
Yeah, Cookie, you're the only one here really who still owns a record label, still producing artists for a record label, and you consult with dozens and dozens of people and tens of thousands of people who watch whatever Cookie says weekly.
Amazing.
Go for it.
Well, I think it comes down to loving what you do, because I started as a musician. I never aspired to be a recording engineer. And when I talk in the studio, I don't even know the names of my gear. I just want it to sound good. So it's kind of a problem I have. As far as it works for other people where the quality of sound has headed, it's very sad. And just inside the studio, what I've noticed is where, you know, over the last 40 years, there was maybe at least people learning to play the guitar. I don't see that anymore. When I was in college as a music major, guitar wasn't even an instrument you considered for college. Now, you barely see real or people learning instruments. There's no longer a piano in every household. People aren't learning how to play music or read music. It's a whole different way of music. Now, I also studied the sitar with Krishna Bhatt. So understanding how other cultures relate to music is something. And one thing that I do is look outside of the United States where people still appreciate music. And where I see recorded music going is more like where video went. And you guys all remember the days of spending a lot of money on a video that was to promote an album. And what I see, and you probably have all experienced this, is it's really about the concerts and the tour and the merchandise, supporting the artist. The recording is just another promotional feature. And you probably, maybe some of you have read some of the things going on with even Universal Music in the last few days announcing, wanting to get rid of the robots and all the artificial music that's going on Spotify. Now, I happen to be a ambient music person myself, and some of it is brilliant. And if now they're going to, make certain decisions that affect all of us, I don't know. It's not that I'm against the robots, but I do think that the word NFTs is coming, where there's going to be limited releases. The way vinyl has become a collector's item, or eventually CDs, another collector's item, and NFTs. The restriction of who owns that music may add value back into it, but it's going to be a very different world. And I don't know, but watching my students and interns and, assistants under the age of 25 and how they deal with even being an audio engineer. No one studies audio engineering for sound quality. Everybody wants to be a producer, get a sample off and create music from samples. And it's quick and easy and it works. I used to be a film composer. I wish I had it back then. But that, I don't know if that's gloom and doom, but I'm just happy to know all of you. And anyway, yeah.
I can say really briefly.
With the same question, Bob, you're in a unique position because of the guy you're working with so much of the time right now, Charlie. What's his take on this thing? Because that's a whole other genre, and he's just taken the genre by storm. Where does he see something like this going?
Yeah, I mean,
Crockett.
Charlie Crockett is somebody I've done a bunch of work for over the last 3 or 4 years, and he and I have had conversations about it. We were last year. We were doing an kind of extended photo trip out in New Mexico, and we were driving down this lonely highway and talking about his records. And I asked him how many records he had sold of his last release, and he was like, I actually don't know. Let me call my label guy. And got on the phone and called his label guy, and they kind of got into a complicated conversation about it. But the takeaway was like, physical copies of his record, not very many. Like, I don't know it's like 10,000.
Well, he's got millions and millions and millions of views on his video track.
And when he sells out, 3,000 to 6,000 seat theaters everywhere he plays.
Right.
And so, but he very much like center to his existence as an artist is the composition and creation of records, of albums. And he's put out 2 records a year for the last 7 years. And some of them are cover records, like most of the cover songs. Some of them, like the last one he did is like a concept record that's kind of like related conceptually to Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger. There's like a storyline, but there's also songs that are kind of tangential. And so he's a student of music and is a devout and knowledgeable student of music, and has devoted a lot of his time and energy to like continuing to present the album as a piece of work. Now, do his fans care about that? I don't know. And like his record label, they care about singles. And so that's what they like spend time trying to convince him to put a song out as a single that will work on radio. And he just kind of is like, okay, this is part of the deal. I got to do this. But what is really near and dear to his heart is the albums. And, I work with a lot of other artists who are more like kind of underground music, like kind of on the heavier side of things. And, the industry, has like, as we have known it for the last 50 years, pretty much collapsed in underground music, but it's become like more of a level playing field in many ways, that there are individual labels that just are basically like, you send me your master, I'm going to make a bunch of copies on vinyl and I'll send them to you and you can sell them at your show and I'll put them on Spotify. And so bands just go out and tour. And honestly, like, I think that, a lot of those bands aren't flush financially, but I think that focusing their careers on playing music to human beings in a room is actually pretty wonderful. And if the collapse of the music industry has enabled more of that, then let it fall, as far as I'm concerned.
No,
I think a lot of bands feel that way too, where it's just like taking out the middleman, and it's just like me going to play for my fans, and we'll sell my records, don't make much money, make more money on t-shirts, make more money on ticket sales. But as far as they're concerned, like playing in front of humans is like what it's about for them.
And Michael, I just have to thank you, Bobby. That was perfectly said. And I didn't realize it, but in making this record, a little side product that I hope comes out of it, I'd like to go start doing concerts. I mean, when I stopped to go more into producing albums, I was up to 150 concerts a year. And, it's just, so then when I ended up producing, I love to start doing more concerts again. I love exactly what Bobby's talking about.
Well, it's challenging. I had to laugh when we were talking about not knowing, like, if it's artificial intelligence or not. And I hearken back to the days when we had to push to get radio to back announce who the artists were.
Right.
Because you would listen to these stream of songs and you might have loved one and you never knew who did it. And that same thing, I mean, I could probably listen to some things and I wouldn't know if it was artificial intelligence or not. And if I like it, I like it. That's what it is. Sorry for me, On the other hand, the beauty kind of what's going on now is I like this diversity of being able to have tracks, because I think we all did have our special tracks out of an album that we like more than others. And those are the ones that we might want to go back to. So you can kind of pull those things out now. And if you want to make a playlist of them, you can do that. At the same token, Spencer, to your release right now, the cool thing, which I go back to keep saying, is the diversity of it. So, and sometimes in the older days, things had to make kind of a story with all the music in it. And if it didn't fit into the mold of that story, then you couldn't have it on the release. If it was something that maybe had oboe, broadcast architects were not going to put it on the radio. It was against the rules. There's no oboe in broadcast architects. There's no accordion in broadcast architects. So you had to become a more, I don't want to say more creative, but you had to become very, you had to figure out a way to get the sound. For me, I had to, figure out, okay, so where could I weave in my world of sound into music in the industry and stay in here? So I think it kind of, as artists, we're always challenged by what we're feeling inside, what we want to express, what we're hearing, what we want other people to maybe experience or not. What we do is for basically our own head. And then it comes out and you just hope somebody likes it. And I think that just getting back to that inner core of needing to express, and there's so much to be expressed right now, given, what is going on in the world, and the fact that maybe we can't do as many live performances because of the pandemic, or maybe we can't do, releases unless we've got a video with it, because now everything is pretty much merged into having a video with your tracks.
Yes.
It's a very image-oriented world right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's challenging, and you just kind of decide if you're going to jump in a dance there and figure out the new dance moves, or if you're tired of dance.
I mean, just as a way of sort of summing up our conversation, I mean, I think where I kind of come down on this is that Spencer's album is this beautiful combination of the composition, the discipline, the performance, and the execution. And so in a world, Bobby, thank you so much for what you said, because you gave it kind of a outside context, but I think really relevant, because I think one of my predictions that I'm writing in my blog, I'll give you one sentence of my blog, is that by the end of 23, there's going to be a thing which is going to be either machine-made or human-made music. And so there will actually be a designation between the two, and it's starting to sort of happen now in the underground. But I mean, it's actually going to be, okay, well, this was made by human beings in a real place, done by people. And what Bobby's talking about is like, well, if I go to a room and I watch a performance and I see a guy pick up the guitar or play the piano or sing a song or whatever, I'm 100% sure that this is really happening in real time. And I think that I think that Cookie is right. I think we're probably going to have less overall recordings probably in the future, but I think performance is going to be the bar is going to be higher. And I think we're going to have to jump higher in terms of getting people's attention in terms of our performances. But I think Spencer's album is already there. I think, like, if you're talking about an album that's going to shine on for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, absolutely. Because I think people want real music. I think people want real emotion. I think people want real pathos. I think people want to feel like they're part of the experience, whatever that is. So, but guys, thank you so much for having this conversation, and thank you for everything you did for Spencer. Spencer, the album is beautiful. It has been one of the honors of my life to be involved with this. And guys, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, everybody.
here.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.